My parents told me I'm not on the guest list. This party is for our inner circle only, not losers like you, they said after stealing 5 grand from my safe, then humiliated me saying I should be grateful they still talk to me since it's only because of my money. Without it, they'd ignore me completely. So I executed my revenge plan by canceling their $50,000 pension, and now they're begging for forgiveness and treating me like royalty. Sup Reddit, my name is Tyler, and I'm 31 years old. I'm single with no kids, and I work in medical equipment sales. It's nothing particularly glamorous, but it pays well enough to live comfortably. Throughout my entire life, I've always been the responsible one in my family. The one who worked hard, saved money, and made practical decisions. My younger sister Madison, who's 26, has always been the complete opposite. She's been the golden child princess who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. This is the story of how I finally reached my breaking point and gave her exactly what she deserved after years of being treated like a personal ATM machine. To truly understand how toxic this situation became, I need to give you some background on Madison. Picture the most stereotypical entitled Instagram influencer girl you can possibly imagine. Then multiply that image by about 15. We're talking fake eyelashes that look like tarantula legs, designer everything from head to toe, and a complete inability to understand that money doesn't actually grow on trees. She lives in this fantasy world where she believes she's destined for fame and fortune, despite having absolutely no real skills or work ethic to back up those delusions. Growing up, Madison was always mom's obvious favorite, and it wasn't even subtle about it. While I was doing household chores every weekend and working part-time jobs throughout high school to save money for college, Madison was getting her nails done professionally twice a week. She would constantly complain that her monthly allowance wasn't enough to buy the designer clothes she wanted, acting like it was some kind of human rights violation that she couldn't afford a new Coach purse every month. When I graduated from high school and started working full-time to pay my way through community college, Madison went off to a 4-year university for marketing. But let's be honest about what that really meant. It was basically 4 years of nonstop partying and taking selfies with the occasional class thrown in between. She treated college like an extended vacation where she could experiment with different looks and personas while posting everything on social media. After I graduated and landed my current job, I worked my ass off to establish myself and build a stable career. Madison, on the other hand, began what I can only describe as her journey through various fake jobs designed specifically for pretty girls who don't want to do actual work. Her first position was as a brand ambassador for some energy drink company, which basically meant posting photos of herself in bikinis while holding their product and calling it professional marketing. From there, she moved on to become a social media consultant, which sounds impressive until you realize it meant managing Instagram accounts for small local businesses. Her job consisted primarily of posting inspirational quotes about hustle culture and entrepreneurship. Despite having never actually built a successful business herself, she would spend hours crafting posts about the importance of hard work and dedication while having never worked a traditional job for more than a few months at a time. After that phase ended, Madison tried her hand at being a lifestyle blogger. This involved posting carefully staged photos of overpriced smoothie bowls and calling it content creation. She would spend entire afternoons at trendy cafes, taking dozens of photos of the same acai bowl from different angles, then write lengthy captions about mindfulness and self-care. The irony was completely lost on her that she was preaching about living authentically while her entire online presence was manufactured and fake. Currently, Madison calls herself a wellness influencer, which is perhaps the most ridiculous title yet. She sells detox teas, face masks, and workout plans to desperate women who somehow believe that purchasing her $97 transformation package will magically give them her body and lifestyle. It's predatory marketing disguised as empowerment, targeting insecure women who are looking for quick fixes to complex problems. Her Instagram account has approximately 13,500 followers, and I'm pretty confident that most of them are either bots or inactive accounts she purchased to inflate her numbers. Despite this relatively small following, she acts like she's the next Kim Kardashian, constantly talking about her brand and her audience, as if she's running some kind of media empire instead of selling snake oil to vulnerable women on the internet. Here's what really gets under my skin about the whole situation. Madison makes maybe $450 to $650 per month from all of this influencer bullshit, yet she lives like she's pulling in 6 figures annually. We're talking designer purses that cost more than most people's monthly rent, professional hairstyling and makeup appointments twice a week, and regularly eating at expensive restaurants that charge $30 for a single entree. She posts it all on social media with captions like, "Grateful for this abundant life," and "manifesting prosperity," as if positive thinking is what's funding her lavish lifestyle. The question everyone should be asking is, how exactly does someone making less than $8,000 per year afford to live like a millionaire? Well, that's where I come into the picture, and that's where this story gets really infuriating. 4 years ago, our father died in a sudden motorcycle accident that completely shattered our family. It was unexpected and devastating, leaving all of us struggling to cope with the loss. My mother was absolutely devastated by Dad's death and told me she couldn't handle dealing with all the bills and paperwork that came with managing a household on her own. She said the stress of managing finances was too overwhelming while she was grieving, and asked if I could help out temporarily until she got back on her feet emotionally. Of course, I immediately said yes without hesitation. What kind of son would I be if I didn't step up to help my grieving mother during the most difficult time of her life? I thought I was doing the right thing by providing temporary support while she processed her grief and figured out how to manage on her own. I had no idea that this temporary help would turn into a permanent arrangement that would define the next 4 years of my life. That temporary assistance quickly evolved into me paying the difference on her mortgage payments, since Dad's life insurance only covered about half of what they owed. I also took over the utilities, car insurance, and pretty much every other monthly bill she had. To make things easier for her, I set up automatic payments for everything because Mom claimed that dealing with due dates and managing money was too stressful after losing Dad. I wanted to remove as much burden from her as possible during her time of grief. Right after Dad's funeral, Madison suggested that we open a joint checking account specifically for family emergencies and group expenses. At the time, it seemed like a reasonable way to handle shared family costs and unexpected situations that might arise. I put in $2,100 to start the account off, while Madison contributed $75 and then never added another penny to it again. Looking back, this should have been my first red flag, but I was focused on helping my family through a difficult time and didn't want to create conflict over money. That joint account became the gateway to what I can only describe as Madison's monthly financial emergencies. About once every month, like clockwork, she would have some crisis that required immediate financial assistance. Her car would break down and need $1,500 in repairs that she couldn't afford. She would suddenly need to pay for a business development course that cost $820 and was supposedly essential for her influencer career. There would be emergency dental work that came to $1,050 that her insurance didn't cover. Or she would be short on rent money because her biggest client didn't pay their invoice, leaving her $1,200 short of what she needed. Every single time, the story was exactly the same. "I'm so close to making it big, Tyler," she would say with tears in her eyes. "This business is about to take off. I can feel it. I just need help getting through this rough patch, and then I'll be able to pay you back with interest." She would promise that her next big collaboration was just around the corner, or that she was about to land a major sponsorship deal that would change everything. The collaborations never materialized. The business never took off. The major sponsorship deals were always in negotiations, but never seemed to close. But somehow, the emergencies kept coming with remarkable consistency, and I kept covering them because I believed her promises and wanted to support my sister's dreams. Here's what really started to piss me off about the entire situation. While I was working 55-plus-hour weeks and living modestly so I could afford to cover her constant financial crises, Madison was posting Instagram stories from expensive spa days where she was getting facials and massages that cost more than most people make in a day. She would show off brand new designer shoes that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, acting like she had earned them through her hard work and business acumen. She would go on weekend trips to Napa Valley with her equally useless influencer friends, posting photos of herself drinking $200 bottles of wine and eating at restaurants where a single meal costs what most families spend on groceries for a week. The cognitive dissonance was absolutely mind-blowing. Here was someone who couldn't afford her rent or car repairs, but somehow had the money for luxury experiences that most working professionals couldn't justify in their budgets. She was living a lifestyle that was completely disconnected from her actual financial reality, funded entirely by my paycheck while she played dress-up entrepreneur on social media. When I finally started questioning some of her expenses and pointing out the inconsistencies between her claimed financial struggles and her obvious spending habits, my mother would immediately jump in with guilt trips designed to shut down any criticism. Tyler, she's still young and trying to figure out her path in life, Mom would say, as if Madison was some lost teenager instead of a grown woman in her mid-20s. You were lucky to find stable work right away. Not everyone has that same fortune. Not everyone is cut out for a traditional job like yours. We need to support her dreams and give her time to find her way. Support her dreams, right? What Mom really meant was that I needed to continue funding Madison's shopping addiction and fake lifestyle while she played pretend businesswoman on Instagram. According to my mother's logic, asking basic questions about financial responsibility was somehow crushing Madison's entrepreneurial spirit and holding her back from achieving her potential. But I kept paying for everything because they're family, you know? I kept thinking that eventually Madison would grow up, figure her shit out, and start taking responsibility for her own life. I thought that maybe if I just supported her long enough, she would eventually mature and appreciate everything I had done for her. I believed that this was just a phase and that she would eventually become a functional adult who could manage her own finances. Spoiler alert, she never did. So we get to this year's Mother's Day situation, which is where everything finally came to a head. About 3 weeks before the holiday, our family group chat started buzzing with discussions about planning something special for Mom. Someone suggested that we pool our money together for a nice dinner at her favorite restaurant. Maybe even splurge on a weekend getaway to show our appreciation for everything she had done for us over the years. Nothing crazy or extravagant, just something thoughtful that would let her know how much we cared about her. That's when Madison completely took over the conversation with her typical dramatic flair and over-the-top enthusiasm. OMG, you guys, I have the perfect idea, she wrote in the group chat, followed by about 6 excited emoji faces. We should do like a luxury brunch thing with professional catering and beautiful decorations. We could make it super Instagram-worthy and create this amazing experience that Mom will never forget. She deserves the absolute best, and we should go all out to show her how much we love her. I replied that catering seemed like it might be expensive and asked what kind of budget we were looking at for this event. I wasn't trying to be difficult or cheap. I just wanted to know what we were talking about cost-wise so we could split the expenses fairly among everyone who was contributing. It seemed like a reasonable question to ask before committing to a major expense. Madison's response was immediate and dismissive. Tyler, it's Mother's Day, she wrote back. This isn't about money or counting pennies. It's about showing Mom how much we love her and creating a beautiful memory that she'll treasure forever. Some things are more important than worrying about the cost. I'm not against spending money on Mom. I've been proving that for the past 4 years by paying for half her living expenses. I just wanted to know what we were planning so I could budget appropriately and make sure everyone was on the same page about what we were committing to financially. It seemed like basic common sense to discuss the budget before moving forward with elaborate plans. Ugh, why do you always have to make everything about money? Madison shot back in the group chat. Some of us actually want to do something special and meaningful for Mom instead of being cheap and counting every dollar. This is supposed to be about love and appreciation, not about being stingy with our finances. That comment stung more than I care to admit. Here I had been quietly funding half of both their lives for the past 4 years, covering everything from mortgage payments to emergency car repairs, and she was calling me cheap for wanting to know what a party would cost. The irony was absolutely infuriating. The person who had been taking my money for years was lecturing me about being financially responsible. The conversation quickly escalated from there. I pointed out that I had been helping financially with a lot of family expenses over the years, and that I just wanted to make sure we planned something reasonable that everyone could afford. I wasn't trying to control anything or be difficult. I just wanted transparency about what we were spending. Madison shot back that just because I have a regular job with a steady paycheck doesn't mean I should get to control how everyone else expresses their love for Mom. She accused me of trying to micromanage the family and turn everything into a business transaction instead of letting people be spontaneous and generous. Then came the real kicker that showed me exactly where I stood in this family dynamic. Mom jumped into the conversation and wrote, Tyler, sweetheart, you know that money isn't everything in life. Madison has such creative ideas, and she really wants to make this day special for me. Can't you just be supportive and let her plan something beautiful without worrying about all the financial details? I felt like I had been slapped in the face. Here I am, literally paying their bills and keeping them financially afloat. And I'm being lectured about being supportive because I asked about a budget for a party. The person who had been subsidizing their lifestyle for years was being treated like the family villain for wanting to know what things cost. Finally, I reached my breaking point and said, Fine, plan whatever you want. But I want to know the total cost up front so I can budget for my share and know what I'm committing to financially. I thought that was a reasonable compromise. She could plan her elaborate party, and I just wanted transparency about what it would cost me. Madison's response revealed her true colors completely. Actually, you know what? Don't worry about it, she wrote in the group chat. I'll handle everything myself. Some of us actually prioritize family over counting pennies and worrying about every little expense. Then, and this is where the situation became truly fucked up, I discovered that Mom had created a new group chat without me. I only found out because my cousin mentioned something about the party planning group when we were talking on the phone a few days later. When I asked what she meant, she got all awkward and uncomfortable, quickly changing the subject like she had said something she wasn't supposed to mention. I confronted Mom about this separate group chat, and she immediately got defensive and started making excuses. Oh, honey, that's just Madison's planning chat with the girls, she said in that tone people use when they're trying to minimize something they know is wrong. You don't need to worry about all the little details and logistics. We're just handling the coordination stuff that would probably bore you anyway. The translation was crystal clear. They had decided that I was too cheap and controlling to be involved in the actual planning process, but they still fully expected me to pay for whatever elaborate scheme they came up with. They wanted to exclude me from the decision-making, but include me in the bill-paying. I was hurt by this obvious exclusion, but I didn't push the issue or create drama about it. I figured I would just show up on Mother's Day with flowers and see what they had planned. 2 weeks before the event, I asked Mom what time I should come over on Sunday and what I could bring to contribute to the celebration. She got that same weird, evasive tone that she had used when I asked about the group chat. Oh, well, it's really just going to be a small thing, she said, sounding uncomfortable. Mostly just the girls getting together, very casual and low-key. Nothing fancy or elaborate. Red flags were going off everywhere, but I decided to let it slide rather than create conflict. I figured that whatever they had planned would be over by the time I arrived, and Mom and I could spend some quality one-on-one time together afterward. Mother's Day Sunday morning arrived, and I was sleeping in, planning to swing by Mom's house around noon with a beautiful bouquet of flowers. I figured that whatever small, casual gathering they had organized would be wrapping up by then, and we could go out to lunch together or just sit on the porch and talk like we used to do when I was younger. At exactly 11:23 a.m., my phone buzzed with a fraud alert notification from my credit union. My heart literally stopped when I read the message. There had been a $4,240 charge to something called Elegant Affairs Catering and Events. My hands were shaking as I immediately called the credit union's fraud department to report what I assumed had to be unauthorized use of my account. The customer service representative confirmed that the charge was completely legitimate. Someone had used Madison's debit card for our joint account at 9:15 that morning to make this massive purchase. My stomach dropped as the reality of what had happened started to sink in. I immediately pulled up the Elegant Affairs website on my phone to see what exactly they specialized in. This wasn't some casual catering company that did simple lunch spreads. They were a high-end event planning service that catered to wealthy clients who wanted luxury experiences. Their signature brunch package for 15 people was exactly $4,240, and the description made my blood boil as I read through what my money had purchased. The package included a gourmet brunch spread featuring smoked salmon, artisan pastries, fresh fruit displays arranged like works of art, and premium coffee service. There was a full bar setup with signature cocktails and champagne service. The event came with professional table settings including white linens, elegant centerpieces, and fine china place settings. They had hired a live acoustic musician to provide ambient background music throughout the event. The package even included a dedicated event coordinator and professional waitstaff to serve the guests. This wasn't some casual family get-together or small gathering like Mom had described to me. This was a fucking wedding-level production that belonged at a country club, not in someone's living room. And apparently, I wasn't invited to the party that I had unknowingly paid for. I sat there in my bedroom, staring at my phone screen and feeling physically sick to my stomach. This wasn't just about the money, although $4,200 is a significant amount that represents weeks of work for me. This was about what the whole situation represented. They had planned this elaborate, expensive celebration, deliberately excluded me from every aspect of the planning process, used my money to pay for it without my knowledge or permission, and then lied to my face about what kind of event it was going to be. My first instinct was to call and confront them over the phone, but honestly, I was too angry to think straight or have a rational conversation. I needed to see this situation with my own eyes to fully understand what had happened and how my money had been spent. I got dressed, grabbed my truck keys, and drove the 50 minutes to Mom's house, needing to witness firsthand what $4,200 of my money had purchased. When I turned onto Mom's street, I couldn't believe the scene that greeted me. There were cars parked everywhere, and these weren't just any vehicles. We're talking about Uncle Pete's black Escalade, my cousin Lisa's white BMW, Madison's white Jeep Wrangler, the one I had co-signed for because her credit score was complete garbage, plus at least 6 other cars I didn't even recognize. The entire neighborhood looked like there was a major celebration happening, and I had to park 3 blocks away because there were no available spaces anywhere near the house. As I walked toward the house, I could hear music and laughter floating through the air. This wasn't just family members having a quiet conversation. It sounded like a legitimate party with multiple people enjoying themselves. When I got close enough to see through the windows, I was absolutely stunned by what I witnessed. The entire living room had been professionally transformed into something you'd see at an upscale event venue. There were multiple tables set up with crisp white linens and elaborate place settings that looked like they belonged in a 5-star restaurant. Each table had stunning floral centerpieces and coordinated balloon arrangements that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month. In the corner, there was actually a guy with an acoustic guitar providing live background music, just like the website had promised. I stood there for a minute just taking it all in, trying to process the magnitude of what I was seeing. This was what $4,200 of my money had purchased, a luxury event that rivaled wedding receptions I'd attended. And I hadn't been invited to any of it. Fuck it, I thought. I walked up to the front door and went inside without bothering to knock. The scene was even more ridiculous and elaborate when viewed from the inside. The dining room table, along with 2 additional folding tables that had been brought in for the occasion, were all set up with fancy place settings that looked like they belonged in an upscale restaurant. We're talking real china plates, cloth napkins that were probably more expensive than my regular dinnerware, and crystal glasses that sparkled under the professional lighting they had set up. But the most absurd detail that made my jaw drop was the goddamn ice sculpture sitting prominently in the center of the main table. It was carved in the shape of a heart with "World's Best Mom" etched into it in elegant script lettering. This thing probably cost several $100s by itself and was the kind of touch you'd expect to see at a high-end wedding reception, not a family Mother's Day gathering. About 15 people were seated around the various tables, and I recognized most of them as family members who rarely show up for anything unless there's free food and entertainment involved. Everyone was dressed to the nines, like they were attending a country club event, eating gourmet food off expensive plates, and looking like they were having the absolute time of their lives at this lavish celebration. Then everyone noticed me standing in the doorway. The entire place went dead silent in that dramatic way you see in movies where the record suddenly stops and everybody turns to stare at the unexpected visitor. You could have heard a pin drop as every conversation came to an abrupt halt. Madison spotted me first, and I watched her face go through a rapid series of expressions. She was wearing this tight pink dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, and her hair had been professionally styled in some elaborate updo that looked like she had just stepped off a magazine photo shoot. Her makeup was flawless and looked like the work of a professional artist rather than something she had done herself. There was a brief moment of panic that flashed across her perfectly made-up face when she realized I was standing there, but it quickly morphed into her signature smug smirk that I had come to hate over the years. Well, she said loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear, setting down her fancy coffee cup with deliberate drama and precision. She stood up slowly and smoothed down her expensive dress, making sure that everyone could see how perfectly put together and elegant she looked compared to me standing there in my casual jeans and polo shirt. "Look what the cat dragged in," she continued with obvious satisfaction. "Didn't think you'd actually show up, Tyler, especially since you made it pretty clear that you didn't want to be involved in planning anything expensive for Mom." The way she emphasized the word expensive with air quotes and a condescending tone made my blood absolutely boil. She was acting like I was some kind of cheapskate who didn't care about Mom, when the reality was that I had been funding both of their lifestyles for years. Mom turned around from where she had been chatting with my aunt, and I swear to God, she looked genuinely annoyed that I was there. This was her Mother's Day party that I had unknowingly paid for, and she seemed irritated by my presence rather than happy to see me. "Tyler," she said, with that fake sweet tone she uses when she's irritated but trying to hide it in front of company. "You should have called first, honey. We weren't really expecting you to show up today. I looked around the room, taking in every detail of this elaborate celebration. Every single seat at every table was occupied. There wasn't a place setting for me anywhere. No empty chair waiting, nothing. It was crystal clear that not only had I not been invited, but they had never intended for me to be part of this celebration at all. I can see that, I said, trying to keep my voice level despite the rage building inside me. Madison tilted her head with mock sympathy, like she was talking to a confused child who had wandered into the wrong room. "Oh, did you want to join us? That's so sweet of you, Tyler," she said with dripping condescension. "But unfortunately," she gestured dramatically around the crowded room with her perfectly manicured hand. "As you can see, we're kind of at capacity here. I planned this whole event for the people who actually wanted to make Mom feel special and appreciated." The implication in her words was crystal clear, that I didn't want to make Mom feel special, that I wasn't someone who cared enough to be part of this celebration. The audacity was absolutely breathtaking. My cousin Lisa, probably trying to diffuse the obvious tension that was building in the room, jumped in with a nervous laugh. "Oh, I'm sure we can squeeze in another chair somewhere. There's always room for one more person at a family gathering." "Actually," Madison interrupted quickly, clearly not wanting anyone to extend an invitation to me, "that would be pretty awkward since the whole thing is already paid for and planned out perfectly. I mean, you can't just add people last minute to a professionally catered event like this. It throws off the whole dynamic and disrupts the carefully planned atmosphere I've created." She was actually enjoying this moment. She was genuinely getting pleasure from publicly humiliating me in front of our entire extended family. I could see the satisfaction in her eyes as she positioned herself as the thoughtful, generous daughter while painting me as the uninvited outsider who didn't belong. Mom stepped closer to me and lowered her voice, like she was trying to be diplomatic and handle an awkward situation delicately. "Tyler, maybe you could come back later this afternoon after we're done here with the celebration," she suggested quietly. "We could visit then and spend some quality time together, just the two of us. Come back later to my own mother's house." After the party that I had paid for was completely finished, that's when the full reality of what was happening here finally hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about excluding me from party planning or making decisions about decorations and food. This was about putting me firmly in my place and establishing a clear hierarchy within the family. This was about showing everyone present that despite the fact that I had been quietly funding their lives for the past 4 years, covering everything from mortgage payments to emergency expenses, Madison was the one who really mattered in this family. She was the favorite, the creative one, the daughter who actually cared enough to throw elaborate parties. And I was just the wallet, useful for paying bills, but not actually important enough to be included in the meaningful family moments. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, holding it up so Madison could clearly see the screen with all the transaction details displayed. "Interesting," I said, making sure my voice carried across the now completely silent room. "Because according to my bank, I'm actually the one who paid for this whole elaborate celebration." Madison's confident smirk faltered for just a split second as confusion flickered across her face. "What are you talking about?" she asked. But I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. "There's a $4,240 charge to Elegant Affairs Catering that posted to my account this morning," I said clearly, reading directly from my phone screen. "The transaction was made from our joint account using your debit card at exactly 9:15 a.m. The room was absolutely dead silent now. Even the professional guitar player had stopped strumming and was pretending to tune his instrument to avoid the awkwardness. You could feel the tension radiating through the entire space as everyone realized what I was revealing. Madison's face went through about 5 different expressions in the span of 2 seconds before finally landing on defensive anger. "Oh my God, Tyler, that was obviously just an honest mistake," she said, her voice getting higher and more strained. "I thought it was my personal account when I made the payment. The cards look exactly the same, and I was rushing to get everything finalized." "Do they really look the same?" I asked, pulling out my own debit card and holding it next to my phone screen that was displaying her transaction details. Because this card clearly says Community First Credit Union and has my name printed right on it. And according to this transaction record, someone who knew the PIN number used it at 9:15 this morning to pay for a luxury catering service. Uncle Pete cleared his throat uncomfortably and started studying his plate like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Cousin Lisa was staring down at her napkin, clearly wishing she could disappear. The guitar player was now actively pretending to be completely absorbed in adjusting his instrument settings. "Look," Madison said, her voice getting even higher and more defensive. "It was an honest mistake, okay? I'll transfer the money back to the account when I get home later today." God, you're making such a huge deal out of absolutely nothing. Nothing? I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. $4,000 is nothing to you? I mean, she gestured around the beautifully decorated room with obvious pride. Look how absolutely beautiful this celebration is. Look how happy Mom is surrounded by people who love her. Isn't creating this kind of magical experience worth something? And it's not like you can't afford it anyway. You make good money and you live alone with basically no expenses. What do you even spend your money on besides work and sitting at home? There it was. Her true feelings finally coming out in front of the entire family. The mask was slipping, and everyone was getting to see the real Madison underneath all the Instagram filters and fake gratitude posts. Mom looked absolutely mortified by what her daughter was saying. "Madison, that's not appropriate to say," she said quietly, clearly embarrassed. But Madison was on a roll now, and all her pent-up resentment was pouring out. Her voice was getting louder and more defensive with each word. "No, Mom, I'm tired of walking on eggshells around Mr. Penny Pincher over here. He acts like every single dollar is some huge personal sacrifice when he literally has no real expenses or responsibilities in his life. No wife to buy gifts for, no kids to support, no social life that costs money. At least when I spend money, it's for meaningful things like creating beautiful experiences like this one." She gestured dramatically at the elaborate party setup with a sweeping motion of her arm, like she was presenting a masterpiece she had created. "I work my ass off every single day building my brand and growing my business," she continued, her voice rising to an almost shrill level. "And he just sits there in his boring little office job, thinking he's so much better than everyone else because he has a steady paycheck and benefits. Well, guess what, Tyler? Some of us are actually trying to build something bigger and more meaningful than just existing paycheck to paycheck." The entire room was staring at her now, and I could see people exchanging uncomfortable glances as they realized that the sweet, creative daughter they thought they knew was actually a spoiled brat having a complete public meltdown. The carefully constructed image she had maintained for years was crumbling right in front of everyone's eyes. I looked around at all these family members who had been sitting here enjoying this elaborate, expensive party. Eating gourmet food, listening to live music, drinking premium cocktails, all paid for with money that had been stolen from me by someone who had just called me a penny-pinching loser with no life or purpose. "You know what, Madison?" I said calmly, keeping my voice level and controlled. "You're absolutely right about everything you just said." She looked genuinely confused, like she had been expecting me to yell back or get defensive, and my calm agreement had thrown her completely off balance. "I do make good money. I do live alone. And I do have very few personal expenses or financial obligations," I continued, pausing to look directly at her. "Which is exactly why I've been able to afford paying for your entire lifestyle for the past 4 years." The confusion on her face deepened as she tried to process what I was saying and where I was going with this line of reasoning. "But you've just made an excellent point about meaningful expenses and priorities," I said, still maintaining that calm, measured tone. "So let me go home and spend some time thinking about what's really meaningful to me and how I want to spend my money going forward." I looked over at Mom, who was standing there looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor and escape this entire humiliating situation. "Thanks for clarifying exactly where I stand in this family," I said to her directly. "Really, it's been incredibly educational to understand the dynamics here." I turned and started walking toward the door, then stopped and looked back at the room full of people who were all staring at me in stunned silence. "Oh, and everyone should definitely enjoy the guitar player," I said with a slight smile. "At $220 an hour, he better be absolutely worth every penny." Then I walked out the door and left them all sitting there to process what had just happened. I sat in my truck for about 10 minutes, just breathing deeply and trying to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. My phone immediately started buzzing with incoming calls and text messages, but I ignored every single one of them. I needed time to think clearly without any outside interference or guilt trips. The drive home gave me plenty of time to really think about the past 4 years and everything that had led to this moment. I thought about every emergency I had covered, every bill I had paid, every time I had been made to feel guilty for asking basic questions about money or expenses. I reflected on how they had deliberately excluded me from planning a party with my own money then humiliated me in front of the entire extended family when I had the audacity to show up uninvited. I thought about Madison calling me a penny-pinching loser with no life, and about Mom asking me to come back later like I was some unwelcome visitor instead of her son, who had been keeping her financially afloat for years. I reflected on every instance where I had been made to feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting to understand where my money was going. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I wasn't feeling angry anymore. I had moved beyond rage into something else entirely. I was determined, clear-headed, and completely done with this toxic dynamic that had been draining my finances and my emotional well-being for years. I sat down at my computer and started making a comprehensive list of every single expense I had been covering for both of them. I needed to see the full scope of what I had been paying for, because I had never actually calculated the total amount before. Mom's monthly expenses that I was covering. Mortgage payment difference, $1,200 per month. Electric bill, $195 per month. Water and sewer, $105 per month. Natural gas, $92 per month. Internet service, $94 per month. Car insurance, $175 per month. Cell phone, $82 per month. Netflix, Hulu, and other streaming services, $48 per month. Gym membership, $52 per month. Total monthly for Mom, $2,043. Madison's monthly expenses that I was covering. Car payment, $395 per month. I was the co-signer because her credit was garbage. Car insurance, $260 per month, high rate due to multiple accidents. Health insurance, $315 per month. I had added her to my work plan when she aged out of Mom's coverage. Cell phone, $92 per month. Various emergencies averaged over 4 years, $670 per month. Total monthly for Madison, $1,732. Grand total monthly, $3,775. Grand total over 4 years, $181,200. I stared at that number for a long time. $181,000. I had spent nearly $200,000 keeping these two people financially afloat over the past 4 years, while being treated like a piggy bank that they could break open whenever they needed cash for their lifestyle choices. I logged into every single account, every autopay system, every subscription service that I had been maintaining for them. One by one, I methodically canceled everything with the appropriate notice periods required by each company. Mom's mortgage payment, canceled. The bank would send her a notice that she was now responsible for the full monthly payment starting next month. All utilities. I called each company individually and requested service disconnection with the required 30-day notice period as specified in their policies. Car insurance. I called and canceled both Mom's and Madison's policies with the required 10-day advance notice period. Phone plan. Both their phones would be disconnected at the end of the current billing cycle, which was in 2 weeks. Streaming services, all canceled immediately. Gym membership, canceled with the required 30-day notice period. Then I called Madison's car loan company. As the co-signer, I explained to them that I would no longer be making the monthly payments on her behalf. They informed me that after 2 consecutive missed payments, they would begin repossession proceedings, which would negatively affect both our credit scores. I told them I understood the consequences and to proceed with whatever actions they deemed necessary. Next, I called my credit card company to report the $4,240 charge as unauthorized use of my account. I explained to them that while my sister had legitimate access to our joint checking account, she had used it for a large expense without my knowledge or permission, which violated our written agreement about how the account was supposed to be used. Finally, I called Mom from my landline since I knew she would be more likely to answer a call from an unfamiliar number. She picked up on the first ring, probably expecting it to be someone calling about the party. "Tyler! Oh, honey, I'm so glad you called," she said immediately, her voice full of relief and false brightness. That whole situation earlier got completely out of hand and escalated way beyond what anyone intended. Madison feels absolutely terrible about what she said to you, and she wants to apologize properly. "Mom," I interrupted before she could continue with what was clearly going to be a lengthy attempt at damage control. "I need to tell you something very important, and I need you to listen carefully." There was a pause, and I could hear the concern creeping into her voice. "Okay, what is it?" "As of today, I am no longer paying for any of your bills or monthly expenses," I said clearly and calmly. "I've canceled all the automatic payments with the proper notice periods that each company requires." Complete silence on the other end of the line. I've canceled all the utility services with appropriate notice periods, so you'll need to contact the electric company, water department, gas company, and internet provider to set up new accounts in your name. I continued methodically. Your car insurance coverage ends in 10 days, so you'll need to get new coverage immediately to avoid driving without insurance. The bank will be sending you information about taking over the full mortgage payment starting next month. Tyler, wait! I don't understand, she said, and I could hear the panic starting to build in her voice. Are you serious about this? Dead serious, I replied without hesitation. For 4 years, I have been subsidizing both your lifestyle and Madison's while being treated like nothing more than an ATM machine with legs. Today made it crystal clear that my financial support isn't valued or appreciated, so I'm stopping it completely. But honey, Madison didn't mean what she said, Mom protested desperately. She was just upset and embarrassed about the whole situation. You know how she gets when she's stressed or feeling defensive. Mom, she used my debit card to pay for an elaborate party that I wasn't invited to, I said, keeping my voice level and factual. Then she called me a penny-pinching loser with no life when I confronted her about it in front of our entire extended family. And you asked me to leave my own mother's house so you could continue enjoying the party. Had unknowingly paid for. I didn't ask you to leave, she said quickly, trying to backtrack. I just thought maybe it would be better to talk later when everyone wasn't there watching and listening to everything. When everyone wasn't watching, I repeated back to her. When you could handle the situation privately instead of acknowledging in front of the entire family that I've been paying for your lifestyle for the past 4 years. More uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Tyler, please, can we just talk about this situation like adults? She pleaded. Come over tomorrow evening and we'll sit down and figure this whole thing out together. Madison will give you a proper apology, I promise you that. No, Mom, I'm completely done with this arrangement, I said firmly. You want to treat me like I'm not really part of this family? Fine. Let's see how long your precious family bonds last when they're not being subsidized by my paycheck every month. I hung up the phone before she could respond with more guilt trips or manipulation tactics. My phone immediately started ringing again, but I turned it off completely. The next few days were honestly the most peaceful and stress-free I had experienced in years. No phone calls asking for money to cover unexpected expenses. No guilt trips about family emergencies that somehow always seemed to happen right before my payday. No stress about whether I could afford my own bills because I was covering everyone else's financial obligations. For the first time in 4 years, I was living within my own means and spending my money on myself instead of funding other people's lifestyles. I did check Madison's Instagram account, though, because I was genuinely curious to see how she would handle this sudden change in her financial situation. Her social media presence had always been such a carefully curated fantasy, and I wanted to see if reality would start creeping into her posts. Monday night, she posted a story about fake people and family betrayal, with some generic inspirational quote about how success threatens small minds and jealous people always try to tear down those who are building something meaningful. Tuesday, she posted another motivational quote about overcoming obstacles that are placed in your path by people who don't understand your vision. Wednesday, her post just stopped completely, which was highly unusual for someone who typically posted multiple times per day. Thursday morning, I got a call at work from Uncle Pete, who sounded genuinely confused and concerned about the whole situation. Tyler, what the hell is going on with your family? He asked without any preamble. Your mom called me last night asking to borrow money for groceries, and she sounded really desperate. She's never asked me for financial help before in her entire life. I took a deep breath and explained the entire situation to him from the beginning. I told him about the 4 years of financial support I had been providing, the excluded party planning, the unauthorized charge for the elaborate catering, and Madison's public humiliation of me in front of the entire family. Jesus Christ, he said when I finished recounting everything. I had absolutely no idea you were paying for all that stuff over the years. I thought your dad's life insurance was covering most of your mom's expenses, and I assumed Madison was actually making decent money from her social media thing. Nope, it's just been me for 4 years straight, I confirmed. And Madison has been taking an average of about $670 a month from me in various emergency situations that somehow never seem to get resolved. There was a long pause as he processed this information. Tyler, I owe you a serious apology, he said finally. We all thought, hell, I don't even know what we thought, that you were just doing well financially and helping out occasionally when needed. Nobody realized you were basically supporting 2 grown adults full-time while they lived like they had trust funds. That's because I never complained about it or made it public, I replied. I thought that's what family members do for each other when someone is going through a difficult time. Yeah, but what they were doing to you, that's not family helping family, Uncle Pete said firmly. That's straight up financial exploitation, and it sounds like they were taking advantage of your generosity for years. 3 weeks after the Mother's Day incident, I was leaving work for the day when I saw a white Jeep Wrangler being loaded onto a tow truck heading in the opposite direction. I couldn't be completely certain from that distance, but it looked exactly like Madison's vehicle, the one I had co-signed for because her credit score was complete garbage. Saturday morning, I went to grab coffee at my usual place downtown, and I ran into my cousin Lisa in the parking lot. She looked genuinely uncomfortable when she spotted me. "Oh my God, Tyler," she said, looking around nervously like she wasn't sure if she should approach me or pretend she hadn't seen me. "I was actually hoping I'd run into you somewhere. I really wanted to apologize for what happened that Sunday at your mom's house." "Thanks for saying that, Lisa. I appreciate it," I replied. "I had absolutely no idea about any of the financial stuff you were dealing with," she continued, looking genuinely embarrassed. "Madison made the whole situation sound like you were just being difficult about party planning and didn't want to spend money on making your mom happy. If I had known that you were actually paying for everything and had been supporting them for years, I never would have sat there enjoying that party." "It's fine, Lisa. Most people didn't know the full extent of what was going on," I said, trying to make her feel less guilty about the situation. "Is it actually true that you've been covering your mom's mortgage payments for 4 years?" she asked, looking genuinely shocked by this revelation. "Among other things, yeah," I confirmed. "Pretty much all of her monthly bills plus. Madison's car payment, insurance, health coverage, and regular emergency expenses." Lisa shook her head in disbelief. "That's absolutely insane. And then to exclude you from the party planning and use your money anyway without telling you. I honestly can't believe Madison thought that was okay to do." "How is she doing now?" I asked, genuinely curious about how Madison was handling her new reality without my financial support. Lisa got quiet and looked uncomfortable again. "Not great, honestly," she admitted. "Her car got repossessed about 2 days ago, which explains what you probably saw in the tow truck. Her phone has been shut off since last week, so nobody can reach her directly. She's been staying at your mom's house, but apparently all the utilities are getting shut off soon because nobody can afford to pay them." "Interesting. Right on schedule with the notice periods I gave them," I said. "So now they're both staying at Aunt Linda's house temporarily while they try to figure out what to do next," Lisa continued. "Madison has been frantically applying for jobs all week. Real jobs, I mean, not the influencer stuff she was doing before. But it's been a serious reality check for her because most employers aren't impressed by Instagram follower counts and wellness coaching certificates. I almost felt bad about their situation. Almost. 4 weeks after the Mother's Day incident, I was making dinner in my kitchen when someone knocked on my front door. I looked through the peephole and couldn't believe what I was seeing on my doorstep. Madison and Mom were standing there, but they looked like completely different people from the polished, put-together women I had seen at that elaborate brunch party just a month earlier. Madison's hair was greasy and pulled back in a messy ponytail that looked like she hadn't washed it in several days. She wasn't wearing any makeup at all, which was shocking for someone who usually wouldn't walk to the mailbox without a full face of professionally applied cosmetics. She was wearing wrinkled jeans and a t-shirt that looked like she had been sleeping in them for multiple nights. This was coming from a person who usually wouldn't leave the house without a perfectly coordinated outfit and professional styling. Mom looked completely exhausted and stressed out, with dark circles under her eyes and worry lines I had never noticed before. She was wearing clothes that I recognized from several years ago, probably because she couldn't afford to buy anything new. I opened the door but didn't invite them inside or make any welcoming gestures. I just stood there waiting to see what they wanted. "Tyler," Madison said immediately, and her voice was shaky and desperate in a way I had never heard before. "We really, really need to talk to you about everything that's happened." "Do we?" I replied flatly. "Please," Mom added quickly, looking like she was about to start crying. "Can we just come in for a few minutes? We need to have a conversation about how to move forward." I stepped aside and let them into my house, but I didn't offer them seats on the couch or drinks or any of the usual hospitality you'd show to welcome guests. I just stood there looking at them, waiting to hear what they had to say. Madison started crying almost immediately, breaking down into sobs before she could even get a full sentence out. "Tyler, I fucked up. I fucked up so badly, and I am so sorry for everything I said and did," she managed to say, between tears streaming down her face. I just stood there silently, watching her fall apart without offering any comfort or reassurance. I know what I said to you was absolutely horrible and unforgivable, she continued, her voice getting more desperate and shaky. I know that using your card without permission was completely wrong. I know all of it was wrong and selfish and terrible. I was trying so hard to impress everyone and make Mom happy, and I got completely carried away with the whole thing. Carried away, I repeated back to her, letting the words hang in the air. I wasn't thinking clearly about how much you actually do for our family, or how hard you work for everything, she said, wiping her nose on her sleeve like a child. I was just focused on throwing this perfect party and creating this amazing experience. And I convinced myself that you could afford it and wouldn't mind paying for it since you always help with family stuff. She was sobbing harder now, barely able to get the words out coherently. I can't afford anything anymore, Tyler. I got evicted from my apartment last week because I couldn't make rent. My car is gone, completely repossessed. My phone has been shut off for 2 weeks now. I've been desperately applying for jobs everywhere, but nobody will hire me because I don't have any real work experience that matters to actual employers. Madison paused to catch her breath, then continued with even more desperation in her voice. It turns out that having Instagram followers doesn't mean shit to people who are hiring for real jobs. Nobody cares about my wellness coaching certificates or my social media marketing experience when they're looking for someone who can actually show up and do work. Mom finally spoke up, looking deeply ashamed of the entire situation. Tyler, we had absolutely no idea how much you had been helping us financially over the years, she said quietly. I genuinely thought that your father's life insurance was covering most of my monthly expenses. When all the bills came due at once last month and I realized exactly how much you had been paying for, I was completely shocked. She trailed off, looking like she wanted to disappear rather than continue this conversation. I got a job, Madison said quickly, like this was supposed to be impressive news that would change everything. It's at Target working the overnight stocking shift. It pays $13 an hour and I absolutely hate every minute of it, but I took it because I need the money. And I'm going to pay you back every single penny that I owe you. The credit card thing. All the emergency money you gave me over the years. Absolutely everything. I looked at her for a long moment, taking in this girl who just 4 weeks ago had been calling me a penny-pinching loser with no life while wearing designer clothes and enjoying a party I had paid for. Now, she was standing in my living room, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days, begging me for forgiveness. How much do you think you owe me, Madison? I asked calmly. She looked confused and uncertain. I don't know the exact amount. A few $1,000s, maybe? Try $30,000, I said, watching her face go completely white. That's just your personal emergencies over the past 4 years. It doesn't include the car payments, insurance premiums, phone bills, or health insurance coverage I've been providing. Her face went from white to green as the reality of that number sank in. And Mom, your bills come to approximately $93,000 over the same 4-year period, I continued matter-of-factly. Mom sat down heavily on my couch without being invited, looking like the wind had been knocked out of her. So we're talking about $123,000 total, plus the $4,200 you stole for the Mother's Day party, I said, letting them both absorb the full scope of what they owed me. They both just stared at me in complete shock, unable to process the magnitude of what I had just revealed to them. Even if you work full-time at $13 an hour, Madison, after taxes you'll make maybe $1,800 per month, I continued, doing the math out loud for her benefit. If you literally gave me every single penny you earned and somehow lived on nothing but air, it would take you approximately 18 months just to pay back what you personally owe me. That doesn't even touch what Mom owes. Madison was crying even harder now, the reality of her situation finally hitting her with full force. I'll do it, though, she said desperately. However long it takes, I'll pay you back every penny. I swear to God, Tyler, I will make this right. Will you really? I asked skeptically. Yes, I absolutely swear, she said, her voice getting more frantic. I'll get a second job if I have to. I'll work around the clock. I'll do whatever it takes to pay back what I owe you. I walked over to my kitchen counter where I had been keeping a thick folder for the past month. It was full of bank statements, receipts, and detailed documentation of every single payment I had made on their behalf over the years. You know what, Madison? I actually believe that you would try to pay me back, I said, opening the folder and pulling out a printed spreadsheet with all the calculations. I think that losing your car and your apartment and your fake influencer lifestyle has been a real wake-up call for you. I handed her the detailed spreadsheet showing every expense broken down by month and category. But here's the thing. This situation isn't just about the money, I continued, looking directly at both of them. This is about respect and how I've been treated as a family member. For 4 years, I have been treated like nothing more than a walking ATM machine instead of your son and brother. Madison looked down at the spreadsheet, her hands shaking as she tried to read through all the numbers. Every single time I asked questions about expenses or tried to understand where my money was going, I was made to feel guilty, cheap, or controlling, I said, my voice getting stronger. You used my money to throw an elaborate party that I wasn't invited to, then publicly humiliated me when I had the audacity to confront you about it. I looked directly at Mom, who was sitting on my couch looking like she wanted to disappear completely. You called me a penny-pinching loser with no life in front of our entire extended family, I said to Madison. And you, Mom, asked me to leave your house. Your son, who had just paid for the party you were enjoying. You were more concerned about avoiding social awkwardness than defending the person who had been keeping you financially afloat for years. The room was completely silent except for Madison sniffling. So here's what's going to happen, I said, walking to my front door and opening it wide. I'm not interested in being paid back at all. They both looked at me with confusion. You know why? I asked, pausing for effect. They both stared at me, waiting for an explanation. Because I don't want to spend the next 3 years having monthly conversations about payment plans and listening to guilt trips about how hard it is for you to make ends meet. I don't want to be connected to your financial situation in any way, shape, or form ever again. I gestured toward the open door. I want you to figure out how to be functional adults without my help. I want you to learn what the rest of us learned years ago. That money doesn't grow on trees, and actions have real consequences that you can't just apologize your way out of. Madison stood up, still crying and looking desperate. Tyler, please, I know I don't deserve any forgiveness, but we're family. Can't we just work through this together? Family? I interrupted, looking directly at her. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't exclude each other from parties they paid for. Family doesn't call each other penny-pinching losers with no life when they're asked to take responsibility for their actions. I looked directly at her with all the accumulated frustration and disappointment of the past 4 years. You spent 4 years treating me like a financial resource instead of a brother. 4 years taking my money while posting on Instagram about your abundant life and manifesting prosperity. 4 years of making me feel like I owed you something instead of acknowledging that it was completely the other way around. Mom stood up from the couch, looking desperate to salvage this situation somehow. Tyler, we understand that you're hurt by everything that happened, and we know we made serious mistakes. But surely we can work through this as a family. We're willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Are you really? I asked, turning to look at both of them. Because 4 weeks ago, you weren't willing to include me in planning a party with my own money. You weren't willing to defend me when your daughter publicly humiliated me in front of our entire extended family. You weren't willing to acknowledge in front of everyone that I had been supporting you financially for years. I gestured toward the door again, making it clear that this conversation was over. The only reason you're both here on my doorstep right now is because the money stopped flowing, I said bluntly. If I was still paying your bills every month, do you honestly think either of you would be here apologizing and begging for forgiveness? Neither of them answered because we all knew what the truth was. I spent 4 years being your personal ATM machine, I continued, my voice getting stronger and more resolved. 4 years watching my sister blow my money on a completely fake lifestyle while acting like she was doing me some kind of favor by taking it. 4 years of being treated like a walking wallet instead of a valued family member. I looked at both of them one final time, taking in their desperate, defeated expressions. So, here's my final contribution to your financial education, I said firmly. Figure it out yourselves, both of you, like actual adults are supposed to do. They left my house without saying another word. I watched from my front window as they got into some beat-up Honda that I didn't recognize, probably borrowed from whoever was letting them stay at their place temporarily. It's been 6 months since the Mother's Day incident that changed everything, and I have never been happier or more at peace with my life. I heard through Uncle Pete that Madison is still working at Target and has picked up a second job cleaning offices on weekends to make ends meet. She's living in a tiny studio apartment with 2 roommates and takes the bus everywhere she needs to go. Her Instagram account went completely dark about a month after our final conversation. It turns out that it's incredibly difficult to be a wellness influencer selling an abundant lifestyle when you're working retail jobs and can't afford the luxury experiences you're supposed to be promoting. Mom had to sell the house and move into a much smaller rental apartment that she can actually afford on her own. She managed to get a part-time job doing administrative work at a local doctor's office. According to Uncle Pete, the reality of actually having to create a budget and pay bills on time has been quite an educational experience for her. People keep asking me if I feel bad about what happened, or if I'll ever consider reconciling with them. The answer is absolutely no, and here's why. I saw Madison last week at the grocery store. She was wearing her Target uniform and looked completely exhausted, buying generic brand everything and clearly struggling to afford basic necessities. When she spotted me, she started to approach like she wanted to have a conversation or maybe ask for help. I nodded politely and continued with my shopping. She didn't try to say anything or start a conversation. She just stood there with this look on her face, like she expected me to feel sorry for her situation. I don't feel sorry for her at all. This is exactly what accountability looks like. This is what happens when the free ride finally comes to an end and you have to face the reality of your choices and behavior. Actions have consequences, and it just took 4 years for theirs to finally catch up with them. For years, Madison lived in a fantasy world where she believed she could treat people terribly, take their money, and face no real repercussions for her behavior. She thought that family obligation meant she could exploit my generosity indefinitely while giving nothing back except criticism and entitlement. Mom enabled this behavior every step of the way, making excuses for Madison's irresponsibility while guilting me into continuing to fund their lifestyle. She chose to protect Madison's feelings over acknowledging my sacrifices, and she prioritized avoiding conflict over treating me with basic respect and appreciation. They both learned the hard way that relationships built on financial exploitation aren't sustainable. When you treat someone like an ATM machine instead of a family member, eventually, that person will stop making withdrawals available to you. The most satisfying part of this entire situation is that they now have to live with the natural consequences of their choices. Madison has to work real jobs with real hours for real money, just like everyone else. She has to budget for groceries and take public transportation and live within her actual means, rather than the inflated lifestyle my money was funding. Mom has to manage her own finances, pay her own bills, and make her own decisions about what she can and cannot afford. She has to face the reality that the comfortable lifestyle she was enjoying was only possible because someone else was paying for it. Both of them now understand what it feels like to work hard for money and have to think carefully about how to spend it. They've learned that financial independence requires actual effort and responsibility, not just finding someone generous enough to subsidize your poor choices. I sleep better at night knowing that I'm no longer enabling their dysfunction. I have more money in my savings account than I've had in years. I can make purchases for myself without feeling guilty about whether I can afford them after covering everyone else's expenses. Most importantly, I've learned to set boundaries and stick to them, even when people try to use family guilt to manipulate me into changing my mind. I've discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their destructive behavior and force them to grow up. The people who really matter in my life, like Uncle Pete and Cousin Lisa, have expressed their support for my decision once they understood the full scope of what was happening. They've told me that what Madison and Mom were doing was completely unacceptable and that I was right to cut off the financial support. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, don't let people exploit your generosity just because they're family. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for expecting basic respect and appreciation in return for your help. And don't be afraid to walk away from toxic relationships, even when they involve people you love. Family isn't about blood relations or guilt trips or obligation. Real family is about mutual respect, appreciation, and treating each other with kindness and consideration. Everything else is just manipulation disguised as love. I have no regrets about my decision, and I would make the same choice again in a heartbeat.